And joining me for this segment, once again, we have the Bronx Borough President, Ruben Diaz, Jr. Thank you for coming back to Reaching Out.
Thank you for having me, Greg, and it was great to be with you a couple of weeks back in the Bronx. We had a good time, didn't we?
Yes, we did. You know, you showed me, and you coined the phrase, the new Bronx. Mm-hmm. You are rebranding the Bronx. And what we did, and our viewers could see those segments on TV and on our website, local237.org. Just go to our video website or our YouTube page. You can see the segments that we did. Now, how have you been so successful in building housing and finding space and doing all the work that's needed?
We've been smart about it. So, you know, in the city of New York, you hear a lot about development that's occurred in other boroughs. You always hear the G word, the ugly G word, gentrification. And a lot of folks used to get really frustrated because there was a lot of development happening in downtown Brooklyn, in Long Island City, in Harlem, the Lower East Side, and everyone always said, what about the Bronx? I've always told people we have to be patient. It's not a bad thing to sort of go last, right? Because we get to learn from those from those instances what worked well and what to avoid and what we could do better. So the way that we've been able to do it is by rezoning a lot of the areas that were industrial, where not much is happening there now, like the waterfront between 149th Street and 138th Street along the Harlem River, the southern part of the Grand Concourse. We've rezoned Webster Avenue between Fordham Row and Woodlawn Cemetery. We've done White Plains Road between Gun Hill and 242nd Street. And we're not in a situation where we need to be concerned about gentrification because there's no one being forced out of there. And the surrounding neighborhoods and the surrounding housing stock where we're rezoning, by and large, are already protected by New York State housing laws.
Very good. And that's a way that you're going to ensure that the Bronx stays with the flavor of the Bronx, the old Bronx, fused with the new Bronx.
Absolutely. Look, we understand, and it's just the nature of the city, that you're still going to have folks coming in. I mean, look, my borough is a borough of 1.4 million residents. 40% of the people who live there were born in another country. So that's always been the history of the city of New York, where new population, new communities, new groups come in to different parts of the city. That's always going to happen. But what we want to do is, as we move forward, as we progress, as we continue to pump public dollars into our public parks, creating jobs, cleaning our waterfront, and all of the good things that are happening in our borough, we also want to make sure that we protect and we create opportunities for Bronxites to be able to stay and enjoy it. That's the reason why you look at the job market and the job creation that we've done in our borough. I'm proud to say that since I've been the borough president, we've cut unemployment by almost half. When I first started there, we were at 14.1%. We had somewhere between 7.6, 7.7%. Life isn't perfect, right? Right. But we're headed in the right direction. The point is that we have been able to find tens of thousands of new Bronxites, actual jobs in myriad of different areas and industries, because we want them to be able to work and to pay their bills and to stay in our borough.
Now, you spoke about gentrification, and there's a proposal by the mayor to take vacant lots, playgrounds, and put, he says, low-income, affordable housing on those developments. And I know I read a statement that you said in the paper, and I know I'm against it because we've had the conversation that is the possibility of driving out the people who are there and this beginning of privatizing the housing authority, where we lose the flavor of New York.
Well, I guess you're talking about the infill program.
The infill program,
right?
Yes.
And I'm not totally against the infill program. I've supported. I've put money into 2 projects in the Bronx. We have Arbor House. There was a great partnership between private sector, the city, myself, the city council, the New York City Housing Authority, the state of New York. And we took some property that was adjacent to forest houses, and we created Arbor House. Arbor House has 54 low-income housing units, and it's a great facility in that it has an enclosed greenhouse.
Oh, so you've already done this?
We've already done this. And we've done this in Soundview. But the problem is this: is that when I hear the chairwoman of the New York City Housing Authority say that not only are they going to take New York City Housing Authority property, but now green space. So we've done this in areas where the New York City Housing Authority was not using the space.
Yes.
In the case of
Sure.
where Arbor House is.
Right.
By the way, up there they have hydroponics in the greenhouse, and our community is growing vegetables and fruits year round, and they're making it readily available to the community so they can eat healthier. In Soundview, you had an old parking lot all the way in the back by Soundview Park, and no one was even parking there. It just looked like a jungle back there. They used to call it the jungle. So we used that and we created housing. Fine. But what I do take issue with and numbers with is when they say we're going to take green space where the children play,
yes,
where the senior citizens sit. And not only that, to add insult to injury, what I also took exception to is you're sort of trivialized. They were sort of trivializing this by saying, those areas, they're full of trash, they're full of garbage anyway. Well, what about this crazy idea? Why don't we clean up those and give the resources to the men and women of New York City Housing Authority, the maintenance workers, who, by the way, many of them live in the New York City Housing Authority. Many of their families and their children play in these green spaces. Why don't we find the resources? And I understand that, NYCHA is struggling and they're trying to find ways. And I also understand that the mayor has this very ambitious plan that I support to create public housing, affordable housing in the city of New York. I support that. But we have to be mindful and we have to plan carefully. We have to plan with a purpose. Not only do we need to protect the green spaces, but then what about all of the other side issues about, for instance, overcrowding in the neighboring schools, if we're not careful, the overstretching of the police precincts, sanitation, transportation, parking spaces. All of these things is something that we all need to talk about before we just say, look, we're going to build there. The other thing is, if you're going to build on a particular NYCHA property, I also want to know whether or not the new tenant or the new developer that's coming in there, whether or not the revenue that they're going to generate for building there, if it's going to go to the actual facility or is it going to go back to the general fund?
Right.
So for instance, if you're going to build in Millbrook houses, which they need help, and someone's going to have that property and they're going to lease the property from NYCHA, is NYCHA going to take that money and then spread it out through all over through the city of New York, or are they going to make sure that the people of Millbrook houses and the maintenance workers there have all of the resources so they can have a better quality of life?
Now, I'm just amazed that you were able to take property from NYCHA, not take it, but use property from NYCHA that was underutilized or not being utilized, and build green buildings there. And that they would come up with a plan without even talking to you. Your plan on a larger scale is much, much better than their plan on a large scale.
Well, this plan started with the former administration, and you're right. I think that there has to be a lot of conversation. I think that if done correctly, there's an opportunity in some developments. If done correctly, it would be a great way for us to provide housing for our seniors, so that some of the seniors who already live in the New York City Housing Authority in bigger apartments because their kids have already become adults and they're not coming back, you put them in those units. We have to make sure that the revenue goes back into that housing authority there, that development. We have to plan again with all of the other issues like transportation and education and all the things that we know as a result of an increasing population are affected. So, just to make a unilateral decision not to include the leadership of the different boroughs. I mean, what may be good in the Bronx may not work for Brooklyn.
Right.
I dare say that what may be good for one part of the Bronx may not even be good for another part of the Bronx. All of this has to, we just can't be in a rush. There just can't be this haste just to create affordable housing and just to get revenue. Because if the thought is that, okay, we want to generate revenue for the New York City Housing Authority, that's fine, but then we're going to be struggling in other areas as well.
Right. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about Legionnaires' disease.
Mm-hmm.
You showed great leadership in that crisis, and you ultimately ended up calling the governor for help because the city wasn't as diligent and fast as they should have been in responding to Legionnaires' disease and calling in the federal government, which is protocol and no-brainer. You call for help when you need it.
Yeah, initially we felt that the city was doing everything that they could, but then when you see that there was not a mechanism in the city of New York to identify, to register these cooling towers that can affect an entire community the way it did in the South Bronx, we proposed legislation. Then to hear that the commissioner, Dr. Bassett, said that while she spoke to the head of the CDC, initially she did not ask or did not accept the help that was offered. And we were hit pretty bad, Greg.
Yeah.
People
died.
We had 12 deaths.
Yeah.
We had 128 people sickened by this.
Yeah.
It was unprecedented. And I thought that all boots should have been on the ground.
Yeah.
And when I'm hearing that not only are they not asking for help, but not even accepting help that's being offered, at a particular point I said, you know what, I need to call the governor. There's no secret that the governor and I have a good relationship. And immediately the State Department of Health came in. He called the CDC. The CDC came in. They had hundreds of inspectors going out there. Then we saw everyone starting to act. And there was a mandatory order by the city subsequent to that for people to clean the cooling towers. And hopefully that horrific span of 3 weeks where so many Bronxites and so many families are still hurting and suffering from it, hopefully that's behind us. And hopefully we will never see that again, not just in the Bronx, but throughout the city of New York.
Well, I could tell you when there's a crisis and you stand up and you show leadership, that's when you know what our leaders are really made of. And I have to commend you for your action and your plan and everything that you did. You weren't afraid to ask for help, and and my members that live in the Bronx and work in the Bronx, and especially in Lincoln Hospital and those places where we were visiting, appreciate your leadership also.
Thank you. And I just want to say this to those that are hearing us and are going to ultimately view this is Legionella is a bacteria that surrounds us every single day. Same way that there's bacteria in the phones, on your cell phone, in the bathroom. And for the most part, those of us who breathe in the Legionella bacteria, because we're healthy, nothing happens. Our body builds up an immunity, and we kill the bacteria. It lodges into your respiratory system, into your lungs. But if you're someone who is older in age, if you have some type of respiratory ailment, pulmonary disease, bronchitis, if you have asthma, if you have HIV/AIDS or cancer, those are the people who cannot fight off this bacteria, and it continues to incubate and grow. And if you feel sick, if you get flu-like symptoms, if you get diarrhea, if you break out in cold sweats, please do not hesitate. Go to the doctor immediately. Go to the doctor immediately. A lot of the people who were sick, the people who passed away, many of them already had a pre-existing sickness, but so many of them waited too long. So we want folks to, whenever you see a neighbor or a family member, or if you feel like that yourself, immediately go to the emergency room, go to the doctor. This is curable with antibiotics, and we just want people to be mindful of that.
That's all the time we have for this segment. Very special guest was Ruben Diaz Jr.,